The first time Granger saw her, she was standing at the edge of the gravel path that led up to his broken-down ranch house. Thin arms wrapped around herself, head down, and not a thing to her name, but a threadbare satchel clutched to her side. The wind whipped her skirts and her dark hair like it meant to carry her off, but she stood her ground. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know where she'd come from, or why she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. All he knew was that his mother had sent for help, and this girl, barely more than a whisper of a woman, was what arrived. His ranch wasn't much anymore. Drought had scorched half the pasture. One of the barns had collapsed in the last storm. And inside the house, his mother, Alma Granger, once a proud woman who held 1,000 acres together on her own before her body betrayed her, now spent most of her days in bed, pain hollowing out her cheeks. Well, hadn't left the ranch in months, safe to pick up supplies or haul water. He didn't have time for company or patience for strangers. But as he watched the girl look up at the sagging porch, lips chapped, eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept right in weeks, he felt something strange in his chest, like a silence breaking open. She introduced herself soft and plain. "My name's Emma," she said, voice nearly carried off by the wind. "I came from up near Ward. Heard you needed help." She didn't look him in the eye when she spoke, and didn't press. He just nodded, stepped aside, and let her in. Emma moved through the house like someone used to silence. She didn't ask questions. She didn't flinch at the dust or the sour smell of sickness. Alma eyed her with suspicion at first, that sharp, cracked voice still holding on to pride. "She's just a girl," she said to Will when Emma had stepped out to fetch water. "What you gonna do here but die of heat?" But Emma didn't die. She stayed. She wiped Alma's face with cool cloths and coaxed her to eat. She swept the floors without being told, mended the linens, patched the roof with strips of old canvas. Will watched her from a distance, confused by how quiet she was, how steady. Not used to it. Not since everything had fallen apart. At night, Will sat on the back steps, staring into the horizon while the cattle moved slow and silent in the dark. He thought of his father, who'd left without a word when Will was 17. Thought of the brother he buried 4 years ago after the mine collapse. He learned not to get close to people because in his world, folks left or died or changed on you. But Emma was still there every morning, her eyes a little less shadowed, her movements a little less guarded. Still, there was something in her that wouldn't let go. Sometimes he'd catch her standing out by the edge of the windmill, staring into the distance like she was waiting for something to follow her. When he asked her, she'd smile tight and shake her head. Just thinking, she'd say, but he knew the look of someone who'd seen too much. Alma warmed to her slowly. One morning Will walked in to find the two of them bent over a quilt, Alma's trembling hands guiding Emma's through the stitching. It was the first time he'd heard his mother laugh in months. A dry, cracked sound, but real. Emma had that effect on the house. Like slowly, day by day, she was pulling color back into it. And still, Will kept his distance. Not out of coldness, but out of fear. She was too young, too quiet, too haunted. He didn't know what ghosts rode behind her. And he didn't know how to ask. What would he say? Who broke you before you got here? He had no right. But the signs were there. One night, he walked past her room and heard her crying. Not loud, not wild, just soft, careful sobs in her pillow like she was trying not to exist. He stood outside the door for a long time, fists clenched before walking on. She never mentioned family, never wrote letters. She didn't go into town, didn't ask for anything. And sometimes, when Alma had fallen asleep and the chores were done, Emma would sit at the far end of the fence line with her back to the house and her arms around her knees, staring toward the tree line like it might come alive and tell her what to do. Will began noticing little things. How she never sat with her back to a door. How her shoulders tensed at sudden sounds. How she flinched when a man got too close, even him. And slowly, the ache in his chest that started as curiosity turned into something deeper. Not pity. He knew she'd hate that. But a kind of quiet, terrible respect. Because whatever had chewed her up and spit her out, it hadn't taken her kindness. One afternoon, while fixing the fence near the west boundary, he found her standing over a dead rabbit, its neck snapped clean. Her hands were still trembling when she turned to him. "Fox got it," she whispered, though her voice was far away. Used to happen near our place, too. But the way her eyes stared down at it, like she saw something else entirely, made Will uneasy. Still, she stayed. Day after day. She cooked and cleaned and cared and never once asked for anything. Not even safety, not even kindness. And maybe that's what broke Will more than anything, that she never expected to be treated like a person. The days bled into weeks. Alma's cough worsened. The nights grew colder. And Emma started leaving her window open, even on chilly nights. Will didn't ask why. He just started checking the perimeter before bed, shotgun in hand, telling himself it was for coyotes. But deep down he knew someone had hurt her. Someone was maybe still looking. And Will, who had spent his life shutting the world out, was starting to feel the pull of something he hadn't known he still had in him. A need to protect, not just because it was right, but because he couldn't bear the thought of her leaving with the same broken look she came with. The ranch was still falling apart. The money was still thin. His mother was still fading. But for the first time in years, something inside him felt alive. Like the silence wasn't empty anymore. And she was the reason. A quiet girl who showed up with nothing. And somehow, without ever asking for it, was mending everything. Alma Granger had once been a force of nature. Sharp-tongued, iron-willed, the kind of woman who could run cattle, raise 2 boys, and stare down a taxman without blinking. But time had whittled her down. The stroke came slow and mean, leaving her legs limp and her voice slurred. Now she spent her days in a narrow bed by the parlor window, the world shrinking to whatever passed by her lace curtain. And though she'd never admit it, the sickness scared her. Her mind was still sharp, but her body betrayed her every morning. She hated needing help, hated that Will had to carry her from chair to bed like she was already gone. So when Emma arrived, quiet, quick-handed, soft-voiced, it caught Alma off guard. At first she bristled, suspicious of the girl's silence, thinking it meant weakness or something worse. But over time, Alma began to see things no one else had noticed. The girl's hands knew how to soothe pain. She folded sheets like a nurse. "She's not just helping," Alma said one morning as Will spooned broth into her bowl. "She's watching, like someone who's seen real trouble." Will didn't answer, but his hand froze halfway to the table. "You be careful with her," Alma added, softer now. "Not everyone stays broken." Will didn't need reminding. He'd seen in Emma too. She moved like she was used to tight corners, used to being told to hurry, to hush, to disappear. When she first arrived, he tried to give her room, tried to pretend she was just hired help. But the way she moved through the house was different than anything he'd known. Like she understood grief. Like she carried her own kind of silence. Their days started early, long before sunrise. Will worked the fence lines while Emma tended to Alma. They passed each other in the halls. Short glances, brief nods, few words. But little by little, small things began to shift. She started leaving hot coffee on the porch rail where she knew he'd sit. He left fresh apples on the windowsill, knowing she'd notice. Their kindness wasn't loud. It wasn't even deliberate at first. But it grew. The first real moment came late one evening after a thunderstorm. Will had returned from repairing a section of busted fencing, soaked and bone-tired. Emma met him at the door with a dry towel. "You don't have to," he muttered. She didn't answer, just handed him the cloth and turned back into the kitchen. Something about that simple act, the way she didn't speak, didn't expect anything back, got under his skin. It wasn't service. It was care, the kind he hadn't felt in years. But not everything was calm between them. Will was used to control, used to shouldering the burden alone. Emma had her own rhythm, her own quiet strength, and sometimes they clashed in small, sharp ways. He didn't like when she ventured into the shed alone. She didn't like when he barked orders without looking at her. One morning, after he snapped at her for overwatering the tomato plants, she turned with eyes cold and sharp. "I didn't come here to be yelled at," she said simply, before walking away. That night, he left an apology in the form of a warm plate on her windowsill. She didn't say a word, but the next morning the plate was washed and left by his boots. Then came Lou Cutter. Lou had been a neighbor once, a rancher whose land backed up to the Grangers. A mean man with crooked teeth and a cruel streak. When the drought hit and cattle prices fell, he sold off most of his land, but he kept showing up uninvited, sniffing around for anything he might steal or bargain for. The first time he saw Emma, he leered. "Didn't know you were running a boarding house now," he told Will, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "She a new gal?" His tone made Will's blood rise, but he kept his voice level. "She's here for my mother," he said. Lou just smirked and tipped his hat toward Emma. "Well, I'd watch her close. Strays don't always stay loyal." Emma was standing on the porch when Lou said it. She didn't react, not even a blink. But that night, Will saw her sitting on the porch long after dark, shoulders hunched, arms crossed tight like she was trying to hold herself in place. He sat down next to her, silent. The stars stretched overhead like shattered glass. He said that like I'm something to be traded, she whispered. Like that's all I've ever been. Will didn't know what to say, so he didn't try. He just sat there, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The silence between them was different that night. Not empty, not sharp, just shared. As fall wore on, the land softened. Leaves turned brittle and gold. The air cooled, and Alma grew weaker. She started forgetting things, names, days, memories. Sometimes she'd call Will by his brother's name. Sometimes she'd stare at Emma with confusion, then whisper, "Where's the baby?" Emma never corrected her. She just sat close and held her hand. It was Emma who found the old quilt in the chest by the fireplace, one Alma had made years ago with her sons. It was frayed and faded, the colors muted, but Alma's face lit up when she saw it. For 3 nights, Emma sat by her bedside, helping her mend it. Will watched from the doorway, something nodding in his chest he couldn't name. He hadn't seen his mother smile like that in years. But even with the softening, the shadow around Emma never left. Sometimes, in the early morning light, Will would see her outside with her sleeves rolled up, her arms marked faintly with old scars. Faded like fire that had cooled, but still there. And once, when a horse reared too suddenly near the gate, she dropped to the ground and curled in on herself before she realized what she was doing. Something had happened to her, something before she got here, and no one had asked, until one night, when Alma had fallen asleep and Will found Emma on the back steps again, arms tucked around her knees. "I lost someone," she said unprompted. Her voice was flat. "A boy. He wasn't mine, not really, but I raised him. My sister's son." Will didn't speak. The wind rustled the brush around them. "His father drank," she went on. "Beat him. Beat me. We ran one night, just the 2 of us. Stayed ahead of him for a while. But one winter, the boy got sick. I had nothing left. No money, no medicine. He died in my arms." She said it so simply, like it had happened to someone else. Like the hurt had turned to ash. Will stared at the dirt, heart pounding. And the father? She didn't answer. For a long time, they sat in silence. When she finally stood to go, she paused. "You don't have to look at me different now. I just wanted you to know why I'm quiet." He didn't reach for her, but something inside him cracked. Not out of sympathy, but because he recognized the kind of loss that rewired you. That left you walking through life with your chest hollowed out. Emma didn't cry that night, but Will did. Alone, later, in the barn. Quietly, like a man who'd held in too much for too long. After that, things between them shifted again. Not louder, just closer. They didn't talk about feelings. They didn't need to. Emma began checking the fencing with him. Will started letting her handle the books. She even went into town once, alone, to pick up medicine. When she came back unharmed, she smiled like she'd won something. And maybe she had. Then, one afternoon in town, Will overheard Lou again. "She's got a record," Lou told a clerk. "Saw the notice myself down in Brazos County." "That girl? She ran off after that boy died. Someone said she was hiding something." Will didn't ask what Lou meant. He just turned and left. But the seed had been planted. That night, he sat up late, staring at the dark window where Emma's lamp still burned. Doubt wasn't something he wanted, but it had a way of crawling in when you weren't looking. Emma didn't know what was coming, but she could feel something had changed. Will's silences got longer, his glances sharper, and when she asked if everything was all right, he only nodded and turned away. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Will didn't know if he was falling for a woman who had buried a truth deep enough to rot, or if he was letting go of the only light that had come into his life in years. Alma noticed too. You look at her like you're scared she'll vanish, she whispered one morning while he adjusted her pillows. She's not a ghost, Will. Don't treat her like one. But ghosts don't leave footprints. Emma did. And whatever truth she was still carrying, whatever storm she'd walked through to get here, was about to have to face it, whether he wanted to or not. The first frost came early that year, coating the fence posts in a hard silver shine by morning and curling the last of the garden into death overnight. The sky darkened before supper now, and Will found himself glancing toward the house more often during chores, watching for a lantern, listening for signs that things were still holding steady. But the silence inside him had shifted. The warmth Emma brought was still there, her steady hands, her quiet presence. But something had crept in between them. Something unsaid, something heavy. It started with a letter. Will found it wedged in the slats of the porch one morning, addressed in shaky handwriting with no return name. He almost threw it out, assuming it was some local nonsense, but something stopped him. Inside was a torn piece of paper, no envelope, no explanation. Just 4 lines. She's not who you think. Look into the boy's death. Ask about the fire. You're not the first fool. There was no signature, no date, just that. Will stood frozen on the porch, heart pounding, the cold wind biting through his shirt. The paper trembled in his hand as a slow, sick feeling rose in his gut. He folded it and tucked it into his back pocket, saying nothing. But his mind spun all through the day. He tried to pretend it was nothing. A trick, a cruel neighbor. Lou, maybe stirring things up again. But deep down, he remembered what Lou had said about Brazos County, about Emma running. That evening, he sat at the dinner table while Emma spooned soup in Alma's bowl, her voice soft, her hands careful. Alma smiled in that gentle, tired way she'd picked up in recent weeks. Emma looked up once and caught Will's stare. Her expression froze for the briefest second before smoothing out. But Will saw it. A flicker of fear, or was it guilt? He couldn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with the letter in his hands, reading it again and again. When he finally did sleep, it was shallow and broken. He dreamed of fire, of a boy's scream, of Emma running barefoot through smoke. The next day, without telling anyone, Will hitched the wagon and rode into town. He didn't go to the store, didn't stop at the mill. He went straight to the county office. The woman behind the desk was tired-looking and polite. She raised an eyebrow when he gave her Emma's full name. You said Brazos County? She asked, flipping through a battered file box. I think there was something a few years back. Domestic issue. A house fire. Will's throat went dry. It says here, sister deceased. Minor male child. Nephew, also perished. Suspect, Emma Caldwell, questioned but released. No charges filed. No one else came forward. Will couldn't speak. The clerk glanced up. It was a bad case. People thought she did it, but there was no proof. Just ashen stories. He left town without a word. That evening, Emma stood on the porch with a basket of laundry when she saw him return. Her smile faltered the moment she saw his face. He didn't speak, just tied the horse and walked past her, the letters still folded in his coat. She followed him inside. Will, she said quietly. What's wrong? He turned. Who were you before this? The question hit her like a slap. She stood still, the basket still in her arms. What do you mean? Don't play dumb, he snapped. The boy. The fire. Your sister. Why didn't you ever tell me what happened? Emma set the basket down carefully. Her hands were trembling. I tried, she said, her voice flat. That night on the porch, I tried. No, You said he died in your arms. You didn't say there were questions. You didn't say people thought you killed them." Emma's eyes flashed. "Because I didn't." "Then what happened?" Will asked, stepping closer. His jaw was tight. "Tell me the truth." She looked away. "We were running. My sister had gotten tangled up with a man. He was dangerous, controlling, violent. He said the boy was his, but I think he just wanted to hurt her. I tried to get them out. I thought I could protect them, but we were too late. That night, the house went up so fast. I don't even remember lighting the lamp. One minute we were sleeping. The next, the whole place was on fire." Will's voice was hoarse. "And the boy, he was coughing. I tried to carry him, but the smoke, I dropped him. I burned my arms trying to go back. But the roof came down." She closed her eyes. "The sheriff said I must have done it. Said maybe I snapped. But there was no proof. Just ruin. And no one left to speak for me." Will felt like the floor had dropped beneath him. Every part of him wanted to believe her, but that letter, that report, the silence she'd kept, it all pulled at him like rope around his neck. Emma stepped forward. "You think I could have done it?" He couldn't answer. The silence between them was colder than the wind outside. For days, they moved around each other like strangers. Alma felt it, though she didn't say much. Emma kept to the far end of the house, did her chores quietly, eyes down. Will watched her when she wasn't looking, heart aching and furious all at once. He wanted to scream, wanted to pull her close and shake her, wanted to believe. But then Lou came again. This time it wasn't just him. Two men rode in with him, lean and grim-faced. They waited by the fence while Lou dismounted and tipped his hat. "Heard you got a murderer living under your roof," he said casually. "Funny how trouble finds a place to land." Will didn't reply. His jaw clenched. Lou's smile widened. "You know the law don't much care out here. But us folks, we care. We keep things clean. You keep her, you take what comes." Behind him, one of the men spit into the dirt. The other fingered a rifle strapped to his saddle. Will said nothing, just turned and walked back toward the house. But Emma was already standing on the porch. She'd heard everything. That night they fought. "You should have told me," he said, voice rising. "You didn't want to know," she cried. "You wanted the quiet version, the one that made you feel good. I wanted the truth. And I wanted a place to breathe," she shouted, her face flushed, her eyes wet. "For once in my life, I wanted to be somewhere I wasn't looked at like a problem. You don't know what that's like." Will turned away, fists clenched at his sides. "I gave you shelter. My mother trusted you. I never hurt her." Emma's voice cracked. "I've done nothing but take care of her. Of you. Then why does it feel like I never knew you at all?" he asked, his voice low. The room fell silent. Emma stepped back, her face white. "Maybe you never tried." The door closed behind her so soft, he almost didn't hear it. She left before dawn. Will found her note by the stove. A few lines in her neat, careful hand. "I didn't come here to ruin anything. I only wanted to be useful. Thank you for letting me be that for a little while. Tell Alma I'm sorry I couldn't stay." She hadn't taken much, just her satchel and a few clothes. The rest was folded, cleaned, placed back in drawers. Like she'd never been there at all. Alma was silent when Will told her, just nodded once and turned toward the window. Her voice was dry and low when she finally spoke. "You let fear talk louder than love." Will sat alone that night on the porch, the stars blurred by wind. Everything inside him hurt, his chest, his throat, his gut, and he didn't know if it was anger or grief. All he knew was that something good had come into his life, and he'd let it slip through his hands like dust. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. But the next morning, something strange happened. A stranger arrived at the fence line. A woman. Dusty, older, worn. She asked for Will by name. "I knew her," she said, pulling off her glove. "Emma Caldwell. She helped me once, years back, after my husband left me with 3 kids. Took nothing in return." Will stared at her. "She came to me again not long ago, desperate. Said she needed help getting her nephew away from a bad man. I gave her money, a place to stay. I was with her the night the house burned. But I was asleep in the shed. I woke up too late." The woman's eyes were steady. "I didn't come forward. I was scared. But now, hearing she's out here, I can't stay quiet. Will's hands trembled. Can you tell the sheriff? I already did, she said. They're reopening the file. He rode after Emma that same afternoon, pushing the horse harder than he ever had. Dust streaked his coat. Sweat clung to his collar, but he didn't stop. He asked every rancher along the road, every wagon he passed. Most hadn't seen her. Some had. Thin girl, they said. Sad eyes. Headed west. Night fell before he found her, walking alone near the bluffs, her satchel slung over her shoulder, wind in her hair. She didn't look surprised to see him. I thought you hated me, she said softly. He dismounted, breathless. I was wrong. Emma stared at him, tears already brimming. It's too late. No, he said, stepping close. It's not. He told her everything. The woman, the letter, the old fear that had blinded him. He told her he didn't care anymore what the papers said, that she wasn't what the town thought, that he didn't believe in her pain. He knew it, because it was his too. And for the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. Not silent tears, not hidden, but loud, aching sobs that broke something wide open between them. He didn't try to hush her. He didn't promise her safety. He just held her while the wind howled past them and the land, scorched and cold, wrapped around them both. Will had once built a life out of silence and work. But now, for the first time in years, he wanted more. He wanted her, and he'd fight to keep her this time, not just from men like Lou, but from the part of himself that had once believed love was too fragile to last. The ride back to the ranch was slow. Will didn't rush her. Emma sat behind him, her arms light around his waist, but there was distance in the way she held herself, like she wasn't ready to believe this would last. Like part of her still expected him to change his mind, to pull away again once the silence between them stretched too long. Will felt that and hated himself for it. She was back, but she wasn't safe. Not inside. Not yet. When they arrived, Alma was asleep. The house was dark, the coals low in the stove. Emma stepped inside carefully, like a guest returning to someone else's home. She didn't go to her room. She sat in the kitchen chair and stared at the empty table, hands in her lap, face blank. Will poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She didn't drink it. I don't know how to be here now, she said after a long while, her voice barely above a whisper. Not after all that. Will sat across from her. Then we figure it out. Emma looked down. You believed them. I doubted you, he admitted. But I didn't want to. I was scared. I didn't know how to carry what you gave me. I didn't think I deserved it. She didn't say anything, just folded her arms tighter. He leaned forward. Emma, you were right. I wanted the quiet version of you. The easy one. I didn't want to ask what that silence cost you. But I know now it cost everything. And I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. Her eyes were red when she looked at him. What happens when I break again? Then I'll stay, he said, even if you don't. But Emma didn't believe in promises anymore. Not the spoken kind. She had learned, too, well, how words lost their shape in the mouths of men. She nodded, slow, but the ache didn't lift. Because even though Will had come for her, had believed her eventually, he still left her to walk alone for days. And part of her would always remember what it felt like to sleep with her back to a wall and her heart waiting to be betrayed again. Over the next week, things returned to a kind of rhythm, but not the old kind. Not gentle, not easy. Alma's health was failing fast. Her appetite disappeared, her breathing labored. She drifted in and out of lucidity, sometimes mistaking Emma for her own mother, sometimes asking Will where his father had gone. Emma stayed at her side, kept her clean, whispered softly to her when the pain grew. But she didn't talk much otherwise. Not to Will, not to herself. Whatever had cracked open in her after Will found her had not yet healed. One night, Will woke to the sound of crying. Not Emma's, Alma's. He rushed to the room and found her clinging to Emma's hand, whispering frantically, "Don't leave him. He's like his father. He pushes people away when he's scared. But he loves hard. Please don't go. Don't go." Emma's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She only nodded. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." Will stepped back into the hallway, his chest tight. The next morning, Alma couldn't speak. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes fluttering. Will sat on one side, Emma on the other. They held her hands while the life slowly left her. Just before the end, Alma turned her head, barely, and her lips moved. Emma leaned close, then nodded. She said she's not afraid anymore, Emma whispered. When Alma passed, it felt like the air left the house with her. The silence afterward was thick. Neither of them spoke for hours. Will busied himself digging the grave by the orchard. Emma gathered Alma's few belongings, folding her dresses, tucking letters away, wrapping a locket in cloth. The funeral was quiet. No visitors. Just the two of them, standing in the brittle light of a November morning, shivering beneath the wide sky. Afterward, they returned to the house, not touching, not talking. Will poured coffee. Emma sat by the cold stove. You loved her, she said quietly. Will nodded. I think she was the last part of me that still felt like home. Emma looked down. So what now? He didn't know. The ranch was falling apart. The fields were bare. The cattle were thin. Winter was coming, and the house felt too big and too empty all at once. That night, Emma sat by the fire alone while Will worked in the barn. She stared into the flames, her mind far off. She thought of the boy, of his laugh, his little hands clutching her skirt, the way he used to draw shapes in the dirt and tell her stories. She thought of the smell of smoke and how it never really left her skin. And she wondered if she had done more, been stronger, seen the danger sooner, would he still be alive? Her guilt was a thread that never snapped. No matter how many kind words were said, no matter how many quiet nights passed, she began pulling away again, not completely, not like before, but in small, subtle ways. She stopped singing to herself when she cleaned. She stopped setting out his coffee in the morning. She spent more time alone in the orchard, staring up at the sky. Will noticed, but didn't know what to do. He gave her space, afraid of pushing. But the space only grew. And soon, they were two people living in the same house with a ghost between them. One morning, Emma told him she wanted to go into town. Alone. Will hesitated, then nodded. All right. She returned hours later, her face unreadable. She'd sold some of her old belongings, fabric, trinkets, and old pendant she used to wear. Will asked her why, and she shrugged. I needed to let go of something. But what she didn't tell him was that she'd also gone to the sheriff. She'd told him everything. The fire, the man who hurt them, the boy's death, her escape. She left nothing out. And when he asked why now, she said, because someone finally believed me. The sheriff had listened. More than she expected. He said her old case had been closed for years, and while some in town might always whisper, the law had no more questions. You've suffered enough, he'd said. Maybe now you let yourself live. But how do you live with the weight of something you can't undo? That night, she told what she'd done. I went to the sheriff. He looked up. Why? Because I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said. Of myself. Of you. Of his house. Will reached for her hand. She let him take it. I'm still scared, she whispered. Even now, I don't know if I can be whole again. If I ever was. You don't have to be, he said. You just have to stay. But that wasn't a promise either. Nothing was. She knew that. People left. Houses burned. Truth came late. Still, she stayed that night, curled beside him in the bed, not speaking, not touching, just breathing. Together. Days passed. The ranch stayed quiet. Will repaired the east fence. Emma began sewing again. They began sharing meals at the table again, slow and careful. The grief was still there. So was the doubt. But so too was something else, something like warmth. But then came a letter, this time addressed to Will. The name on the return line chilled him, Clayton Morris. Emma saw the name too. Her face turned white. He was the man, the one Emma had fled from. We'll read the letter in silence. It was short. You think you know her. You don't. She left before they found the other body. She'll ruin your life next. Will crumpled the paper, fury rising like bile. He's trying to scare you, he said. Emma sat at the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled. There was no other body. He's lying. I know, but even as he said it, The fear in her eyes hollowed something in him. The past wasn't done with them. Not yet. Will, she said slowly, if this man shows up, if he comes here, he won't. But if he does, I won't let him near you, he said. But they both knew what she was really asking. Will you still believe me, even then? She didn't need protection. She needed trust. And Will understood now. He could only keep her if he trusted her enough to lose her. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay beside her, listening to the wind outside, heart pounding. He thought of Alma, of the pain she'd carried. He thought of Emma, how many times she'd woken alone, walked alone, begged for someone to believe her. He thought of himself, the boy he used to be, the man he'd become. And somewhere before morning, he decided, whatever came next, he wouldn't flinch again. Even if the world tried to burn them down like before, he would not move. He would hold the line. For her. For the truth. And when the storm came, because it would, he'd face it at her side. The knock came just after sunset. 3 hard raps on the front door, sharp and deliberate. Will was in the barn brushing down the gelding when he heard it. Too early for a neighbor, too forceful for a delivery. He paused, hand tightening around the brush handle. The air felt off, still thick, like the moment before a thunderclap. He stepped outside slowly, eyes narrowing toward the house. The light in the parlor glowed steady. Emma was inside, alone. By the time Will crossed the yard, Emma had already opened the door. And there he was, Clayton Morris. He stood on the porch like he belonged there, tall, broad, clean-shaven but rough-edged. His coat was expensive but worn. His boots shined like he hadn't worked a day of real labor in years. But it was his eyes that froze Will's blood. Cold, empty. The eyes of someone who thought they owned whatever they touched. Emma had gone pale. Her arms crossed in front of her chest like a shield. She hadn't said a word. Will came up behind her. Get off my land. Clayton smiled. Well now, that's not very hospitable. His voice was slow and slick like oil. I only came to see an old friend. You're not welcome here, Will said, stepping forward. Clayton didn't move. Emma, he said, eyes never leaving hers. You ran off in such a rush. Left behind so much. I figured you'd be grateful I came to clear things up. Emma's jaw trembled, but she stood her ground. There's nothing left to clear. Oh, I don't know, he said casually. Folks might still be curious. You remember the little girl across the road? The one who swore she saw you carrying something out of that house before the fire? Nobody believed her at the time. But it's funny how stories change when enough ears listen. We'll step between them. You say one more word. Clayton held up a hand. I'm not here to fight. Just wanted to give Emma a choice. He looked around the porch, slowly. Doesn't look like much of a life out here. You think this man's gonna protect you forever? What happens when he's gone? When winter hits and this house crumbles? Get off my land, Will said again, this time lower, dead calm. Clayton smiled wider. It's not your land I want. Will moved faster than he thought he could. He grabbed Clayton by the collar and shoved him back down the porch stairs. The man stumbled but didn't fall. He straightened his coat with a sneer. Touch me again, he said, and I'll make sure every lawman in this county hears about the killer you've been harboring. Will reached for the shotgun by the door. Clayton raised both hands and took a slow step back. Not today, he said, but I'll be around. You two stay warm now. He turned and walked off into the darkness, whistling low as he went. Emma stood frozen. Will looked at her. Her hands were shaking, her breath shallow, eyes distant. She looked like she was slipping away. He's lying, she whispered. I know, Will said, but even as he said it, something inside him twisted. That line about the little girl, about carrying something. A crack formed, thin but deep. And Emma saw it. You believe him, she said, voice flat. Even now, I believe you, Will said quickly. But I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Emma's face tightened. Already did. Did you? He asked softly. Emma, what did you carry out of that house? She stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her lips trembled. I tried to save him, she said. I went back into the house twice. The second time, I found my sister's body. The boy. He was near the window, curled up. I thought maybe. She stopped, took a breath. I wrapped him in a blanket. I didn't know he was already gone. I just couldn't leave him there. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't even realize I was outside, standing in the yard with him, until the neighbor ran up screaming. She thought I'd killed him. She saw the smoke, saw me holding him like that. Thought I'd done it, but I was trying to save him. Will stepped forward slowly, gently took her arms. Why didn't you tell me? Because, she whispered, you looked at me different already. I saw it. The first time I told you anything, you pulled away. Will felt like his chest was breaking. I was afraid, he said, but not of you, of losing something good again, of not being enough for you. Emma looked down. I'm tired, Will. I'm tired of proving I'm not a monster. You don't have to, he said. Not to me, but the damage had already started to bloom. That night, Will couldn't sleep. He sat at the edge of the bed, watching the window, watching the dark. What if the girl had seen something more? What if there was a part of Emma's past she hadn't told anyone? Not even herself. Could he still love her if she had done something unforgivable? Did it even matter anymore? Emma lay awake, too, staring at the ceiling. Her heart thudded in her chest, not because she was hiding, but because she was exhausted. Telling the truth hadn't saved her. Running hadn't saved her. Even love hadn't saved her. And now, with the past clawing at her heels, she wasn't sure if anything ever would. In the morning, she was gone again. This time, she didn't leave a note. Will found the door open and her boots missing. The ranch was quiet, cold, empty in a way it hadn't been in months. He rode out searching, heart hammering, praying she hadn't gone to the river, to the cliffs, anywhere she could disappear. But he didn't find her there. He found her in town, standing in front of the sheriff's office, Clayton a few feet away, his arms folded smugly. Emma's face was blank. I came to turn myself in, she told the sheriff, to answer for everything. I'm tired of running. Will froze. No, I need this, she said, not looking at him. I need this to end. I can't live waiting for the next letter. The next knock. I want it over. The sheriff looked between them, then back at Clayton. You have proof? He asked. Clayton smiled. Just my word. That's not enough, Will snapped. Clayton stepped forward. She ran for a reason. Emma looked up finally into Will's eyes. I didn't run because I was guilty, she said. I ran because no one would believe me. But I believe me, and that has to be enough. Will reached for her hand. It is. Emma, please, don't let him do this. The sheriff sighed. Look, there's no open warrant. The case is closed. Unless someone wants to reopen it with evidence. I've got nothing to hold her on. Emma blinked. So that's it. That's it, the sheriff said. Clayton's smile fell. Will step between them. You come near her again, he said low. I won't call the law. I'll bury you myself. Clayton turned and walked away, fury stiff in his spine. Emma turned to Will, eyes wide. It's done, he said. It's over. She shook her head. It's never over. It just hides. They rode home in silence. The wind was sharp, the land brittle, but something had shifted. Not in the world. In her. That night, Emma sat on the porch alone. Will joined her after dark. She was holding the locket Alma had given her. Inside was a photo of Alma's boys, long before the war, before the fire, before everything changed. She trusted me, Emma said, even when I didn't trust myself. She saw you, Will said. So do I. Emma looked at him, tears building. I need you to understand something, she said. I don't know if I'll ever stop flinching, or doubting, or waking up in cold sweats. But if I stay, it's because I choose to, not because I'm healed, not because I'm fixed, just because I want to. Will took her hand. Then that's enough for me. The wind picked up. A storm rolled quietly in the distance. But for the first time, Emma didn't pull away from the sound. The betrayal had come. The confrontation. The nearly unbearable weight of truth. And yet, they were still sitting side by side. That, she realized, was the difference. This time, she hadn't been left alone to carry it. The morning after the storm, the light hit the fields soft and golden. The ground was still damp from the rain, the kind that washes everything down to the bone. Emma stepped outside with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, the air smelling like wet cedar and fresh soil. She could see Will by the east fence, his silhouette steady and sure as he hammered a post into place. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the tightness in her chest had loosened. Not all the way, but enough. They didn't speak about Clayton anymore. Not because they were afraid, but because he had no more weight. After the confrontation at the sheriff's office, he disappeared like smoke. No letters, no visits. He tried to use fear like a leash, and it hadn't worked. And men like that, they always moved on when control slipped through their fingers. Emma still glanced over her shoulder sometimes. She still startled at loud knocks. But the fear didn't own her. She was learning the difference between being alert and being haunted. She and Will settled into something real. Not perfect, not easy, but true. They didn't talk much about love. They didn't need to. It was in the way she started making extra bread again. In the way he left his gloves by her door, so she'd know when he'd be back. In the quiet evenings where they sat with their backs against the porch posts, sharing a blanket, watching the sun drop past the edge of the land. One afternoon, Will brought her a bundle, an old saddlebag with tools, brushes, and fresh sketch paper. "I saw you drawing in the margins of Alma's letters," he said. "Thought you might want real space." Emma smiled, the first full smile he'd seen in weeks. She took the paper with both hands like it was something sacred. And that night, by lantern light, she began to draw again. Not just flowers or fences, but faces. A boy's face. Alma's hands. Will's eyes. The past was still there. It always would be. But it no longer felt like a fire waiting to catch. It felt like something she could shape, something she could turn into story or memory, or even something beautiful. Later that fall, Will received a letter. Not from a threat, but from the town council. The Granger Ranch had been nominated for preservation. Alma's work, it turned out, had been recognized by someone who'd passed through once and remembered her strength. They offered funding, a chance to rebuild the barn, to repair the main house. Will showed the letter to Emma in stunned silence. She'd have hated the attention, he said. Emma laughed softly, but she'd have loved being right. They started planning small things, a new roof in the spring, a water pump fixed. Emma suggested opening up a part of the ranch for children from town to visit in summer, maybe teach them a care for horses, maybe let them feel what it meant to belong to land instead of being pushed by it. Will looked at her then, that same quiet way he always had, but there was more in it now. Trust, awe, gratitude. Winter settled hard across the plains that year, but inside the house the fire stayed warm. Emma no longer avoided mirrors. She no longer flinched when Will touched her arm. Some nights she still woke in a sweat, heart pounding from old dreams. But now there were arms to catch her. Hands that didn't press, just held. One evening, as the wind howled against the shutters, Emma sat by the fire, flipping through Alma's old recipe book. Tucked in the back was a photo, one she hadn't seen before. Will, as a boy, crouched beside a scruffy dog, dirt on his cheeks, eyes bright. Alma's handwriting on the back read, "He'll carry everything if you let him. But don't forget, he's got a soft heart under all that weight." Emma showed it to Will. He stared at it for a long time. "She always knew," he said. Emma reached for his hand. "So do I." The house was quiet again, but not in the way it once had been. Not empty. It held memory, yes, but also something forward-facing, something steady. One morning, near spring, they stood by Alma's grave together. The frost had melted, and the earth had begun to breathe again. Emma knelt and laid a sprig of wildflowers across the stone. "I used to think surviving was the same as living," she said softly. "But it's not." Will nodded. "Living means staying, even when it's hard." She looked up at him. "Are you staying?" He smiled. "You know I am." Behind them, the house stood strong, its bones old but unbroken. A place built by a woman who never let life silence her. and now kept alive by two people who had nearly been crushed by silence themselves. Emma didn't know what the future would look like, but for once, she wasn't bracing for the worst. She wasn't guarding every part of herself against betrayal. She had lived through it, and somehow, she still had something left to give. The lasting message wasn't one she spoke aloud. It was in the way she rose each day and faced the wind, in the way she let herself rest, in the way she chose to love even after being taught not to. Justice hadn't come in the form of a trial or a grand clearing of her name. It came quietly, when the lies stopped mattering, when she realized she didn't need to explain her pain to be worthy of peace. And grace, it turned out, was something she gave herself. There was no final kiss in the snow, no music swelling as the screen faded. Just two people standing together on land that had seen too much and still gave back. And maybe that was the most honest ending of all. Not a fresh start, but a life finally beginning.